In the early years of the Pacific War, Japan ruled the skies. Their pilots, flying the agile Mitsubishi A6M0, were legends, undefeated, fearless, and proud of their unmatched skill. The Zero's dominance seemed absolute. Against it, the Allies struggled. American and British aircraft were often slower, heavier, and less maneuverable. Many believed no fighter could challenge Japan's aerial superiority. But that belief would soon be shattered. In 1942, a new aircraft began to appear in the Pacific theater. A strange, twin-engined machine with long, slender booms and a cockpit pod in the center. It looked unlike anything Japan had faced before. The Americans called it the P-38 Lightning. At first, Japanese pilots laughed at the sight of it. To them, a twin-engine fighter seemed heavy, clumsy, and unsuited for dogfights. But soon, their laughter turned to fear. The P-38 Lightning wasn't just different, it was revolutionary. The P-38 Lightning was the brainchild of Lockheed engineers and one of America's most brilliant aircraft designers, Clarence Kelly Johnson. When it first took flight in 1939, it represented a leap into the future. Its twin Allison V1710 engines, each equipped with a turbo supercharger, gave it extraordinary speed and high-altitude performance. The Lightning could climb higher, fly faster, and strike from farther away than almost any aircraft of its time. By the time the P-38 entered combat in the Pacific, the Allies desperately needed a fighter that could reach the distant battlefronts spread across the ocean. The Lightning's long range made it perfect for the vast Pacific theater. It could escort bombers, intercept enemy aircraft, and carry out reconnaissance missions over distances that no other Allied fighter could manage. To the Japanese, accustomed to facing short-range fighters, the Lightning's presence deep in enemy territory was a surprise. They began calling it the Two-Tailed Devil. Its silhouette, with twin booms and a central fuselage, became a symbol of death in the skies. The Lightning's first major combat operations in the Pacific began in late 1942 and early 1943. American pilots quickly learned that the aircraft had both strengths and weaknesses. It was not as nimble in tight turns as the Japanese Zero, but its power, firepower, and speed more than compensated. While most Allied fighters mounted machine guns in their wings, the P-38 carried all its armament, 4 .5 caliber machine guns and one 20mm cannon in its nose. This configuration gave it unparalleled accuracy. A Lightning pilot could open fire from several hundred yards away and still deliver a devastating, concentrated burst of fire. Japanese pilots, used to close-in turning battles, found this new kind of opponent confusing and deadly. Before they could close in for a dogfight, the P-38 would strike from long range, fire, and break away before the Zero could react. Captain Thomas Maguire, one of the top American aces, once described the P-38 as a plane that could hit like a hammer and vanish like smoke. It could dive faster than any Japanese aircraft, climb to higher altitudes, and escape almost at will. Japanese pilot Takeo Kato, one of the Imperial Navy's respected aces, recalled his first encounter with the Lightning. He said later, "It came out of the sun. Before I could turn, I saw flashes, then smoke. My wingman was gone. It was the first time I feared a foreign plane." The impact on Japanese morale was real. For the first time, they faced an aircraft they could not outclimb or outrun. The Lightning's top speed exceeded 400 miles per hour, almost 100 miles faster than the Zero in level flight. And thanks to its turbo superchargers, it retained that power even at 30,000 feet, where Japanese engines began to choke for lack of air. In 1943, the P-38 became central to the U.S. strategy in the Pacific. It escorted bombers on long-range missions, struck enemy shipping, and hunted enemy reconnaissance planes. American pilots began using boom and zoom tactics, diving in from altitude, making a single deadly pass, and climbing away before the slower Japanese fighters could respond. These tactics made the most of the P-38's strengths and minimized its weaknesses. As Japanese pilots tried to adapt, they found themselves fighting an enemy that dictated the terms of every battle. Among the most famous missions involving the P-38 was the interception of Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, the mastermind behind the attack on Pearl Harbor. On April 18, 1943, U.S. intelligence intercepted Yamamoto's flight schedule over the Solomon Islands. 16 P-38 Lightnings were sent on a daring, low-level interception mission, flying nearly 1,000 miles round-trip. They arrived precisely on time. In a dramatic aerial ambush, the P-38s shot down Yamamoto's transport and his escort. The operation stunned Japan. The impossible had happened. Their most powerful military leader was dead, brought down by America's twin-engine fighter. After that mission, the P-38 became legendary. Japanese intelligence began studying the aircraft closely, trying to find its weaknesses. They discovered it was large and heavy, less agile at low speeds. Some pilots learned to exploit this by dragging it into tight turns, but few survived long enough to test the tactic twice. The Lightning's pilots became some of America's top aces. Major Richard Bong, flying a P-38, scored 40 confirmed victories, the highest number of any American pilot in World War II. His friend and rival, Thomas Maguire, followed closely behind, with 38. Both became symbols of American air power. To the Japanese, the Lightning seemed invincible. Pilots reported that even when they damaged one, it often kept flying. The twin engines provided redundancy. If one failed, the plane could still return home. Many American pilots owed their lives to that design feature. Technically, the P-38 was ahead of its time. It was the first fighter to exceed 400 miles per hour in level flight, the first to use turbo supercharging effectively, and one of the first with a tricycle landing gear. Its range exceeded 1,300 miles, allowing missions across the vast Pacific, a capability unmatched by any Japanese fighter. Its cockpit offered an advanced radio and oxygen system, making it suitable for high-altitude operations. Its twin engines allowed for excellent stability, making it an effective gun platform. And its central nose-mounted armament meant that every bullet traveled straight, no convergence issues like wing-mounted guns. Despite these strengths, the Lightning wasn't perfect. In tropical climates, the engines sometimes overheated. Pilots had to manage engine temperatures carefully. But even with those challenges, it remained one of the most capable aircraft in the American arsenal. By late 1943, the tide of the Pacific War had begun to turn. The once feared Japanese Zero was now being outclassed. The Lightning, together with newer American fighters like the F-6H Hellcat and F-4U Corsair, dominated the skies. Japanese pilots began describing encounters with the P-38 as hopeless duels. Many said that even if they spotted the aircraft first, its speed and climb rate made it impossible to escape once engaged. The psychological impact of the P-38's reputation was enormous. To the Allies, the Lightning was more than a fighter. It was a symbol of technological superiority and industrial power. To the Japanese, it was a reminder that the era of easy victories was over.
By early 1944, the Pacific War had entered a new and brutal phase. Japan's early victories were fading into history, and the Allies were beginning to strike back across vast stretches of ocean. The island-hopping campaign was underway, and air power had become the key to victory. In this changing war, one aircraft was emerging as the weapon of choice, the Lockheed P-38 Lightning. The Lightning was no longer an experimental presence. It was now the backbone of the U.S. Army Air Forces in the Pacific. Its range, speed, and firepower made it indispensable. From bases in New Guinea, the Solomons, and the Central Pacific, P-38s roamed far and wide, escorting bombers, sweeping enemy skies, and attacking ground targets deep behind enemy lines. American pilots were mastering the aircraft's unique flight characteristics. The twin engines demanded careful handling, but when flown well, the Lightning performed like no other. Pilots learned to manage engine temperature, use the turbo superchargers effectively, and take advantage of its power at high altitude. They also learned the tactics that would make the P-38 nearly unbeatable. The doctrine of boom and zoom, dive, fire, and climb away, became the Lightning's signature maneuver. The idea was simple, but deadly effective. Instead of trying to turn with the nimble Japanese Zeros, P-38 pilots attacked from above, delivered their firepower in a single devastating pass, and then climbed back to altitude using their superior engine performance. The Japanese pilots tried to pursue, but their aircraft could not match the Lightning's climb rate or diving speed. Many paid with their lives. In mid-1943 and throughout 1944, the skies over New Guinea and the Solomon Islands became a deadly classroom. American pilots gained experience quickly, and the results were devastating for Japan. Entire squadrons of Japanese aircraft were wiped out in aerial ambushes. Lightning pilots began recording multiple kills in single missions. The U.S. Army Air Forces soon realized that the P-38 was not just effective, it was a war-winning machine. Among the pilots leading this charge was Major Richard Bong. A quiet, modest man from Wisconsin, Bong would become America's top ace, scoring 40 confirmed victories, all in the P-38. He was admired not just for his skill, but for his calm confidence. Bong's technique was methodical. He often climbed high, positioned himself above enemy formations, and waited for the perfect moment to strike. When he did, his bursts were short, precise, and deadly. In many of his missions, Japanese pilots never saw him coming. Another pilot, Major Thomas McGuire, was equally formidable. Aggressive and fearless, McGuire pushed the Lightning to its limits. He scored 38 victories before his death in early 1945. Between Bong, McGuire, and dozens of other Lightning pilots, the aircraft accounted for thousands of Japanese losses by war's end. But the Lightning's success was not just due to its pilots. It was also the result of continuous technical improvement. Lockheed engineers worked tirelessly to refine the design. Early issues with compressibility, the tendency of the plane to lose control in steep dives, were gradually solved. New dive recovery flaps were installed, allowing pilots to recover from high-speed dives safely. Engine reliability improved, and the aircraft's cooling system was redesigned for tropical operations. By 1944, the P-38J and P-38L variants represented the peak of the design's evolution: fast, stable, and lethal. Meanwhile, Japan's air forces were struggling to adapt. The Imperial Japanese Navy and Army were losing their veteran pilots at an alarming rate. Training programs that once produced elite flyers now rushed inexperienced replacements into combat. Many of these new pilots faced the P-38 in their very first missions, and most never returned. The once proud Japanese Zero was no longer invincible. Against the P-38's speed, altitude, and firepower, it was outmatched. Japanese reports from the time tell a grim story. Pilots described the P-38 as a white monster that appeared suddenly, struck hard, and vanished before they could respond. Some even believed the Lightning's twin tails made it harder to hit, as bullets passed between the booms. Others said its engine seemed indestructible. In reality, it was the combination of technology and tactics that made the difference. By the middle of 1944, the P-38 had become a familiar sight over every major battlefield in the Pacific. In the skies above the Philippines, the Lightning led massive fighter sweeps to clear the way for returning American forces. In New Guinea and the Dutch East Indies, it destroyed supply convoys, bombed airfields, and intercepted enemy reconnaissance planes. Its versatility allowed it to perform missions that no other single-engine fighter could complete. It also became the preferred aircraft for long-range escort missions. When American bombers struck Japanese bases in the Caroline and Mariana Islands, P-38s often accompanied them, providing vital protection. Japanese fighters attempting to intercept the bombers were met head-on by the Lightnings. Their heavy armament, 4 50-caliber machine guns and a 20-millimeter cannon, could rip through the thin frames of enemy aircraft with a single burst. One of the P-38's lesser-known roles was photo reconnaissance. Modified versions, stripped of guns and equipped with cameras, flew deep into enemy territory to photograph airfields, ports, and troop movements. These missions were dangerous, but critical. The Lightning's speed and range made it the best platform for this work, and many of the Pacific Campaign's most important intelligence successes came from these flights. Technically, the P-38 was a marvel. Its twin engines used turbo-superchargers that allowed full power even at extreme altitudes. Its counter-rotating propellers eliminated torque problems, making it stable in flight. Its tricycle landing gear made takeoffs and landings safer on rough island airstrips. These features combined to create a machine that was years ahead of its time. But even as the Lightning dominated the skies, it faced growing challenges. The Pacific weather was unpredictable. Sudden storms, towering clouds, and tropical heat tested both pilots and machines. Navigation was often difficult. Long missions over water meant that even a small error could result in disaster. Many P-38s were lost not to combat, but to fuel exhaustion or mechanical failure over the open sea. Yet the crews continued to fly, often beyond the limits of endurance. In 1944, as the Allies advanced toward the Philippines, P-38s were among the first aircraft to strike enemy positions. They escorted bombers on attacks on Japanese shipping, strafed airfields, and cleared the skies for invasion forces. The Lightning's reputation as a long-range escort reached its peak during these operations. Japanese forces tried desperately to defend their bases, but their fighters were outclassed. One encounter over Leyte Gulf illustrated the changing balance of power. A formation of Japanese fighters attacked American bombers, escorted by P-38s. Within minutes, the Lightnings broke through their formation, shooting down several attackers before they could even reach the bombers. Not a single American bomber was lost. For Japan, such outcomes were becoming common. The Lightning was not only feared by Japanese pilots, it was respected. Surviving Japanese aces later recalled that the P-38 was the most challenging opponent they faced. It was fast, durable, and deadly accurate. One veteran, Saburo Sakai, described it as the only American plane that could fight on its own terms. He admitted that the Lightning's speed and twin-engine power made traditional dogfighting useless. If you tried to chase it, you were already dead.
By early 1945, the Pacific War was reaching its violent climax. The Allies were closing in on Japan from every direction. The island chains that had once served as strongholds for the Imperial Japanese Navy were now under relentless assault. From New Guinea to the Philippines, from the Marianas to Okinawa, the Japanese Empire was collapsing piece by piece. In the skies above this crumbling empire, one aircraft still held its place as a symbol of American power and persistence: the P-38 Lightning. The P-38 had already proven itself in every major campaign of the Pacific. Now, as the war neared Japan's doorstep, it continued to play a vital role in the long and grueling air operations of 1945. With its unmatched range and heavy firepower,
the Lightning became a key weapon in the Allied push toward Japan's home islands. By this stage of the war, Japan's air forces were a shadow of what they had once been. The elite pilots of 1941 and 1942 were gone, replaced by young, inexperienced flyers with only a fraction of their predecessors' training. Fuel shortages, production difficulties, and the destruction of aircraft factories had left Japan's military aviation in crisis. Against them stood American pilots with years of combat experience, flying one of the most refined aircraft designs of the war. In January 1945, P-38s were deeply involved in the liberation of the Philippines. Operating from newly captured airfields, they provided bomber escort, reconnaissance, and ground attack missions. Their twin engines gave them an added layer of security over the vast stretches of ocean separating the islands. Pilots could push farther than ever before, striking Japanese airfields, shipping lanes, and troop convoys as they retreated northward. One of the defining features of the P-38 during these operations was its versatility. It could adapt to nearly any mission. Some Lightnings carried bombs beneath their wings, using their speed to perform hit-and-run strikes on enemy targets. Others were fitted with cameras for long-range reconnaissance over Formosa and the South China Sea. A few were modified into night fighters, using radar equipment to hunt Japanese aircraft after dark. The Lightning had become more than a fighter. It was a complete weapons system, shaped by experience and necessity. For Japanese pilots, the skies of 1945 were a nightmare. Many flew obsolete planes that could barely reach the speeds the Lightning cruised at. The once feared Zero was now a relic, its lightweight frame no match for the new generation of American aircraft. And even when Japanese pilots managed to take off, they often faced overwhelming numbers of Allied fighters. Encounters that had once been duels were now massacres. Survivors recalled the frustration and despair of facing the Lightning. Its twin-engine roar was instantly recognizable, a deep, menacing sound that carried across the sky. To many Japanese airmen, that sound meant death was near. Some refused to engage when they saw the twin tails glinting in the sunlight. They knew that their aircraft, their tactics, and their training could no longer match the technological superiority of the Americans. Throughout early 1945, Lightning squadrons supported the massive amphibious assaults on Iwo Jima and Okinawa. These battles were among the bloodiest of the entire war, and air superiority was crucial. P-38s flew long-range patrols, intercepted enemy bombers, and provided close air support for ground troops pinned down on the beaches. In the skies over Okinawa, they faced not only traditional fighters, but also a new and desperate weapon, the kamikaze. The kamikaze attacks shocked the Allied forces. Japanese pilots, many barely out of training school, were sent on one-way missions to crash their planes into ships. It was a final act of defiance, born from desperation. Against this new threat, the Lightning's speed and range proved invaluable. P-38s patrolled far beyond the fleet, intercepting kamikaze formations before they could reach their targets. Many lives were saved by these long-range fighter sweeps. The Lightning became not just an offensive weapon, but a shield for the men fighting and sailing below. Even as the P-51 Mustang began to take a more prominent role in escorting bombers from Iwo Jima to Japan, the Lightning remained indispensable in the Pacific. Its twin engines gave pilots peace of mind over long stretches of water, something single-engine planes could not match. Many missions over Japan's southern islands, including Kyushu and Shikoku, still relied heavily on the Lightning's endurance and reliability. By mid-1945, Japanese resistance in the air was collapsing. The once feared aces of the Imperial Navy and Army Air Forces were gone. American pilots now faced fewer enemies in the sky, but more anti-aircraft fire from the ground. Lightning squadrons shifted their focus to ground attack, strafing airfields, destroying fuel depots, and wiping out the remnants of Japan's logistical network. Each mission brought the war closer to an end. On the ground, Japanese civilians watched helplessly as waves of Allied bombers and fighters filled the skies. To them, the silver glint of twin tails against the sun was a haunting sight. It meant that the war had reached its final, unavoidable stage. The Lightning had become a symbol of the overwhelming force that was now descending upon their homeland. As American forces prepared for a possible invasion of Japan, the P-38 continued to fly daily missions. Its pilots knew that the war's end was near, but none could predict how it would come. Then, in August 1945, the unthinkable happened: the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Within days, Japan surrendered. The war was over. For the pilots of the P-38 Lightning, the announcement brought a mix of relief and disbelief. Many had spent years fighting across the Pacific, from the jungles of New Guinea to the skies over Okinawa. They had witnessed the rise and fall of Japan's air power. Now, the machine that had carried them through those battles was finally grounded. By the time peace was declared, the P-38 had flown more than 130,000 combat missions in every theater of the war. It had destroyed thousands of enemy aircraft, ships, and installations. It had served as a fighter, a bomber, a reconnaissance plane, and an escort. Few aircraft in history matched its versatility or its impact. More than any other, it had defined the aerial war in the Pacific. The statistics told only part of the story. For the men who flew it, the Lightning was more than just metal and engines. It was a partner. Powerful, demanding, and faithful. Many pilots credited it with saving their lives. Its twin engines often brought them home after sustaining terrible damage. In letters and diaries, they wrote of the comfort they felt hearing both engines still running as they crossed the endless stretches of sea toward their bases. After the war, the P-38 quickly faded from frontline service. Jet aircraft were emerging, and propeller-driven fighters were becoming obsolete, but the Lightning's legacy endured. It was remembered as the aircraft that bridged the gap between early war desperation and ultimate victory. It represented the spirit of innovation that defined America's wartime industry. The ability to design, build, and perfect a machine capable of dominating the skies against a formidable enemy. In post-war Japan, memories of the Lightning remained vivid. Many former Japanese pilots spoke of it with a mixture of respect and dread. To them, the sight of the twin tails meant that the tide of war had turned for good. It symbolized a shift not just in technology, but in destiny.